Now, when it comes to a linear equation, we have to understand that each input value, so what we would often consider to be x, but it could really be anything, is directly associated or related, you could say, with an output value or a solution or y value. So it is directly related. Each one is directly related. So if the input is something, the output will be something else. Every single time we get that one input, we're going to get the same output. Okay? If we change the input, we'll get a different output. But again, every time we use the same input, we're going to get the same output. Okay? So it should happen over and over again. What we're going to do here is we're actually going to solve for a variable. So in this case here, we're going to use x to solve for y. And in the opposite way, we can do the same thing. We can use y to solve for x. So if we're given this equation here of 7x minus 2x is equal to y, we want to determine the value of y when x equals 2 and when x equals negative 2. Okay, so we want to solve for that. The first thing we need to do is, again, just like we looked at earlier, we want to understand that we need to combine our like terms. So the 7x and the negative 2x need to be combined, and we need to put them together. So we're just going to quickly kind of draw that here. Again, we have these two like terms. And so when we combine those, we have 7x's and negative 2x's, and it will combine for 5x. And so 5x is equal to y. Once we have this here, this is our simplified equation. Now we can actually solve for either x or y. And in this case here, we're given x, so we want to try to solve for y. So let's solve this equation for when x equals 2. Okay? What we're going to do here, we're told that x equals 2, so we're going to plug that 2 back in for x. And so what that's going to look like, I'm going to always use brackets when I plug something in, even if it's not negative. So I'm going to do 5, and then I'm going to put in brackets 2, and that equals to y. So what I did is I plugged the 2 in for x. Now the 5 was being multiplied to x, so in the same way, the 5 is going to be multiplied to 2. And when we multiply 5 times 2, it's going to be 10. And that's going to be equal to y. So when x equals 2, the y value is 10. Now what happens if x is negative 2? How does that change things, or does it change things? Do we get the same answer? Well, let's take a look. Okay. When x is negative 2, now instead of putting a 2 in for x, I'm going to replace it with a negative 2. So we're going to still do the 5. We're going to do the negative 2 here, and again, I put that into brackets. Now again, negatives we usually put in brackets, but here I put it in there because 5 times x, so it's 5 times negative 2. When we multiply these two together here, okay, 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. Okay, and the other side is still y. So it tells us that our y value is negative 10. When x is negative 2, the y value is negative 10. So it's a unique y value. Now, it just so happens that we did 2 and negative 2, and it just so happens that we get positive 10 and negative 10. It doesn't always happen that way, but if we're just multiplying by a variable, it usually will. Okay? Then in that case, then it will. Now, what happens if we want to try to solve for c and we're given d? So in this case here, I'm using different variables, which is okay. And so we're going to solve for the equation using this equation for c when d is equal to 0.5. First things first, we need to combine our like terms. So we're going to combine that term, our two c terms, and we're going to put them together. Okay, so those two, we have negative 5c and positive 3c. And so when we combine that, we get negative 2c is equal to d. Now, once we have this here, that's our first step. Now we need to insert our d value into the equation. And we're going to insert that right in for d. So we're just going to replace the d with 0.5. So negative 2c is equal to, if you want to put into brackets, you can. You don't really have to, but if you feel more comfortable doing that, you can do that. And now we get negative 2c is equal to 0.5. The brackets aren't really needed because it's just a number and it's all by itself. So to solve for this now, Again, we need to get C all by itself. So we are going to divide, let's get a different color here, one that we haven't used lately. We need to divide both sides by a -2. Okay, so we need to divide both sides by -2. And again, as we've seen before, this is going to now cancel out. And we're going to get our C value all by itself. All right, so C now is by itself. And now we need to do 0.5 divided by -2. Well, 0.5 divided by 2 would be 0.25, and you can use a calculator for that if you need. And because we're doing a positive divided by a negative, it's going to be a negative. Now, on my calculator here, I'm going to do 0.5 divided by -2. And you'll notice here, I'll put it up to the screen. You might be able to see it. There we go. Okay, it gives me a -0.25. So C is equal to -0.25. And that would be our final answer. Okay, so our C value, so when D is equal to 0.5, our C is -0.25. And that would be our final answer. Work on questions 5 and 6. 5 and 6, I've given you an equation. All you need to do is simplify it and then plug in values of either X or Y or whatever variable I give you to solve for the other one.